royal power embodied in bronze. Today, Benin's treasures symbolize an international dispute.
They are subject of loot. They were illegally taken out of the country.
There's no indication that the bronzes were part of the items stolen.
On the outside, Benin City looks just like every regular city in Nigeria. But beneath that facade is a history that dates back centuries. One of the oldest cities in Western Africa, the city has been celebrated for its artistry, its monarchy, and the astonishing metalworks that emerged from its royal courts. But what if we told you that beneath its busy streets and familiar red soil lay secrets that have only just been revealed by a construction project? And what if we told you that this discovery would become the key to unlocking one of West Africa's most extraordinary archaeological revelations? It's hard to believe, but it's true. The question now is, what is this discovery? And why did it shock the world of history? Let's find out. A forgotten piece of history. When archaeologists first arrived at the proposed site for the new Museum of West African Art in Benin City, their expectations were measured. Not because they weren't interested in unearthing something utterly mind-blowing, but because they didn't even know what lay beneath the soil. The team of archaeologists was there for one reason and one reason alone, a standard requirement in historically layered locations known as pre-construction archaeology. The thing is, the palace precinct of the old Benin Kingdom, although long gone, is known to rest beneath parts of the modern city. Regardless, most believed the excavation would produce, at best, a familiar mixture of domestic debris and isolated cultural materials typical of urban archaeological work. Instead, what emerged was a landscape far richer, more continuous, and more informative than even experienced researchers anticipated. However, to understand the weight of what the archaeologists were uncovering, one must first understand the world that once stood above these foundations. The Kingdom of Benin, centered in present-day Benin City, was not a vague historical footnote, but a highly organized state with a sophisticated political structure and a long-standing artistic tradition. Its palace complex, now largely lost except for fragments and memories, was once the administrative and spiritual core of the kingdom. Here, rulers governed, guilds worked, rituals were performed, and diplomatic visitors from within and beyond West Africa were received. Unfortunately, most of what global audiences know about Benin has been filtered through foreign accounts. Portuguese traders who visited in the 15th and 16th centuries, British officials, or colonial-era scholars. These sources often described the city's impressive earthworks, the well-laid streets, and the scale of the palace network. But for all the praise or curiosity these accounts offered, they could never capture the full complexity of Benin's urban life. Archaeology, for the first time at this scale, was giving the kingdom back its architectural voice while also offering an immersive look into the past. The old Benin Kingdom. Speaking of the past, did you know the old Benin Kingdom was one of the most densely organized urban centers in pre-colonial Africa? That's right. The Kingdom of Benin, which flourished from at least the 13th century until the late 19th century, was one of West Africa's most sophisticated states. It boasted a combination of political authority, urban planning, and artistic achievement. In short, the kingdom was a pretty big deal. Centered around present-day Benin City, it was ruled by the Oba, a king considered both a political leader and a spiritual figure. Although the Oba's authority was absolute, it operated within a complex administrative system. Chiefs oversaw specific regions or guilds, while palace officials managed the affairs of the city, religious practices, and diplomacy. Pretty forward-thinking, wasn't it? This hierarchical structure allowed the kingdom to govern a densely populated urban center and maintain far-reaching trade networks. Nonetheless, the Oba's palace was the heart of the kingdom, sprawling across several acres with concentric courtyards, ceremonial halls, shrines, and residential quarters. Architecture combined practicality with symbolism. Walls were often constructed of earthworks and mud, carefully leveled and reinforced, while courtyards organized both movement and social hierarchy. Pathways and gates controlled access to the Oba, with certain areas reserved for officials, priests, and artisans. Shrines, small temples, and ritual spaces were embedded within the palace and surrounding neighborhoods, reflecting a worldview in which governance and spirituality were inseparable. Even more impressively, art was central to Benin's identity. The kingdom produced the renowned Benin bronzes, intricate plaques and sculptures in brass, ivory, and wood, many depicting obas, warriors, and court ceremonies. But these objects were not purely decorative, as they served as historical records, spiritual symbols, and markers of status and power. Artisans belonged to guilds that transmitted skills across generations, maintaining technical precision and cultural continuity. In fact, one of the most striking features of the old Benin kingdom was its extensive system of walls and moats, designed both for defense and urban organization. These earthen ramparts, built and expanded over centuries, circled the city and its surrounding villages, with some estimates suggesting their total length exceeded 16,000 kilometers, making them among the largest man-made structures of the pre-modern world. The walls were not merely physical barriers. They marked political boundaries, controlled access, and organized the flow of people and goods within the city. Gates, bridges, and carefully designed entrances regulated who could enter different precincts, while the moats protected them from both human and natural threats. Think of the Great Wall of China. Unfortunately, despite its strength, the kingdom faced challenges. By the late 19th century, the British Empire had growing commercial and political interests in the region. Tensions culminated in the 1897 punitive expedition, which followed the killing of a British delegation. Soon after, British forces invaded Benin City, looted the palace, destroyed buildings, and forced the Oba into exile. There was very little the kingdom could do to protect itself. The British had come with an overwhelming military intervention armed with superior technology. It was an unfair battle. Just like that, the once sophisticated empire crumbled like a dry piece of cookie. The ripple effect was insane. There was a rupture in cultural continuity and the dispersal of the city's treasures to Europe, where they remain today in many major museums. Yet the legacy of the old Benin kingdom endures. Its urban planning, governance, and artistic excellence shaped centuries of local life and left a tangible imprint beneath the modern city. Now, archaeological excavations allow scholars to reconnect with the structures, workshops, and ritual spaces that made Benin one of Africa's most remarkable historical civilizations. And in 2022, a team of archaeologists was about to make a discovery that would change history forever. Moa and pre-construction archaeology. The rediscovery of Benin's buried past did not begin with a quest for ruins or a dramatic search for lost treasure. Surprisingly, it began with a construction plan. In 2021, the Museum of West African Art, known simply as MOWAA, announced a major cultural precinct to be built a short walk away from the Oba's palace. The idea was bold: a modern architectural complex dedicated to conserving West African material culture, training new generations of conservators, and giving the Benin bronzes a home rooted in the society that created them. But for archaeologists, the project posed an equally important question if you were about to build on some of the most historically loaded ground in West Africa. What lay beneath the soil? And what would you lose if you did not look first? These questions shifted the entire pace of development. Before a single foundation could be poured, MOWA and its partners launched what would become the largest archaeological excavation in Benin City in decades. This approach, called pre-construction archaeology, is standard in many parts of the world, but rarely executed at this scale in Nigeria. The principle is simple. When construction threatens to disturb potentially significant archaeology, scholars move in first to study, record, and preserve what the ground has held for centuries. But the thing is, in Benin, That principle carried unusual weight. The palace complex, destroyed in 1897, once sprawled across this landscape. Generations had lived, ruled, crafted, and worshipped on this very soil. No one really knew how much evidence had survived, so they had to find out. The excavation team included archaeologists from Nigerian institutions, the Cambridge Archaeological Unit, heritage scholars, ceramic specialists, and community members from Benin City who knew the terrain intimately. They divided the project area into grids, open trenches, and in a matter of weeks began uncovering layers that spanned eras, soil horizons packed with pottery sherds, traces of walls, organic remains, ash lenses, and metalworking debris. Just like that, what had been planned as a technical step in a construction timeline quickly turned into a window deeper and wider than anyone expected. In the twinkle of an eye, the pre-construction phase evolved into a full-scale scientific investigation. Archaeologists worked through the red earth with a mix of caution and urgency. Every trench revealed new complexities, densely packed cultural deposits several meters deep, foundations indicating human occupation and architectural planning, artifacts lying exactly where they had been discarded, used, or ritually placed centuries earlier. As the work expanded, it became obvious that the site was not simply adjacent to history. It was woven into the royal and urban fabric that had defined Benin's power for more than half a millennium. By the time the first season of excavation ended, MOWAA's building plans had become something larger, a platform not only for exhibiting West African art, but for rewriting what scholars thought they knew about the ancient city itself. The project meant to build upward had instead compelled everyone to look downward first, and what they found would reshape the story that belongs to Benin and the world. Beneath the city, the first trenches revealed dense layers of soil shaped by centuries of occupation. Within days, the team identified foundations of ancient structures, lines of packed earth walls, traces of courtyards, and clusters of post holes marking the outlines of long-vanished buildings. But these remnants were not scattered haphazardly. They were patterned, oriented, and connected in ways that suggested organized planning. Even at the earliest stage of the dig, it became clear that this was not merely a collection of historic fragments, but part of a broader architectural system that once formed the heart of Benin's political and cultural life. As excavation continued, evidence of activity zones began to emerge. In one area, archaeologists uncovered concentrations of ash, charcoal, and ceramic fragments that indicated domestic or communal use. In another, the soil held residues of craft production, metalworking debris such as crucible fragments, casting waste, and remnants of furnaces. It was incredible. These finds aligned with long-standing historical accounts of the Benin Palace as a hub of specialized craftsmanship, where brass casters, ivory workers, and other guilds operated under royal patronage. Now, however, those accounts were no longer confined to oral tradition or archival reports. The ground itself was providing physical proof of how these industries functioned within the palace complex. Alongside these discoveries came pottery, so much pottery that some archaeologists describe the site as one of the densest ceramic assemblages uncovered in the region. Each sherd held information about trade, food preparation, social rituals, and shifts in material culture across centuries. Some pieces belonged to everyday vessels, others to ceremonial forms, and together they contributed to a clearer chronological sequence of Benin's urban development. Perhaps the most striking early realization was the continuity of occupation. Layer by layer, it became apparent that this area of the city had been in use for hundreds of years, possibly stretching back before the height of the Benin Kingdom's influence. By the time the first phase of the excavation ended, researchers understood they were uncovering one of the most comprehensive archaeological windows into Benin's past ever recorded. Some layers revealed compacted earth floors, smoothed repeatedly by centuries of footsteps. Others contained refuse pits filled with animal bones, shell remains, or food debris. These details allowed researchers to piece together how the palace community lived beyond the grandeur and ceremony often associated with royal courts. And then there were the shrines. Although only structural traces survived, platforms, post holes, or carefully deposited objects, their presence hinted at the spiritual world that shaped palace life. The Benin court was deeply ritualized, governed by traditions that intertwined politics with cosmology. Archaeologists found deposits of pottery, beads, and other ritual materials intentionally placed in specific formations, indicating acts of devotion or renewal carried out by palace priests and attendants over many generations. The more the team uncovered, the more they realized how seamlessly daily activities blended with ceremonial ones. A courtyard used for administrative gatherings might sit beside a workshop area, while a shrine could occupy a corner of a corridor or open into a communal space. This integration was a reflection of a worldview in which governance, craftsmanship, and spirituality were not separate domains but interrelated components of a functioning political center. Importantly, each discovery aligned with known historical narratives but also expanded them. The extensive craft production areas provided tangible evidence of the guild system that supported the Oba's authority. The layers of habitation reinforced the understanding of Benin as a continuous, thriving urban center. The shrines illuminated the ritual responsibilities that underpinned royal power. What archaeology achieved here was not embellishment, but grounding. It offered physical confirmation that the historical Benin kingdom was not merely artistically gifted or politically influential, but an urban, organized, deeply interconnected society. What these finds mean? The discoveries at the MOWAA excavation did more than uncover artifacts. They revealed the structure of a city. The patterns of walls, courtyards, and post holes indicated that the palace precinct was a carefully planned urban center. Buildings were arranged with purpose, creating zones for administration, production, and ritual. Paths and open spaces connected these zones, suggesting circulation routes that allowed both people and resources to move efficiently through the complex. In short, Benin was not an ad hoc settlement. It was a deliberately designed capital where planning and functionality underpinned the authority of the Oba. Evidence from the workshops deepened this understanding. Metalworking areas filled with slag, crucibles, and casting floors pointed to specialized guilds that operated under strict organization. These were not casual artisans. They were skilled craftsmen producing items for the palace, ritual offerings, and objects that became symbols of Benin's influence. Not to mention the scale of production, which pretty much implied a sophisticated management system capable of supplying the court and coordinating labor over extended periods. It's both an economic and a social complexity. The ceramic assemblages, too, provide insight into daily life and long-term occupation. There's the pottery, a reflection of both domestic and ceremonial use, showing that spaces were multifunctional. Some vessels bear signs of repeated use, while others appear intentionally deposited in ritual contexts. Archaeologists interpret these patterns as evidence of a society in which work, worship, and governance were not separate spheres, but interconnected parts of everyday life. Perhaps most striking is the continuity of occupation. Stratigraphic analysis demonstrates that this area of Benin City was inhabited for centuries, with layers of construction and rebuilding marking the persistence of urban life. This continuity might even help explain how Benin developed its material and artistic sophistication, including the production of the Benin bronzes, which required consistent technical expertise and institutional support over generations. It also helps that these findings reinforce oral histories and archival accounts. Long-held knowledge about the palace layout, craft guilds, and ritual practices gains material confirmation in the soil itself. Tangible evidence of 1897 and colonial aftermath. Beneath the soil of Benin City, the remnants of the past are layered not only in craft and architecture, but also in destruction and disruption. Interestingly, one of the most historically significant layers revealed by the MOWAA excavation corresponds to the 1897 British punitive expedition, when colonial forces attacked the city, destroyed the Ober's palace, and looted its treasures. While written accounts and surviving artifacts have long documented the event, the excavation offered material confirmation of what had long been reported: the violent rupture of a complex, thriving urban centre. Archaeologists uncovered collapsed walls, burned deposits, and scattered objects in ways that align with historical records of the assault. Floors were disrupted, pottery shattered, and metalwork debris found in chaotic patterns. What's even more interesting is that these layers contrast sharply with the carefully arranged occupational deposits from earlier centuries, showing a sudden and destructive interruption. In fact, in some trenches, ash and burned organic material overlay habitation layers, providing a clear chronological marker for the events of that year. In essence, the stratigraphy offers a rare window into the physical consequences of colonial violence, allowing researchers to study the impact of destruction alongside the more familiar narratives of plunder and exile. Beyond these immediate traces, later layers demonstrate how the city and palace precinct were reconfigured in subsequent decades. Colonial administration, urban redevelopment, and local rebuilding activities altered the landscape, creating new foundations over older structures. Roads, residential plots, and informal workshops were constructed, sometimes directly over collapsed palace walls. These changes pretty much captured how urban life adapted and persisted despite the violent rupture. The interplay between destruction and continuity is also visible in the recovery of artifacts. Some items, such as broken pottery or damaged metal tools, appear to have been discarded hastily during the attack, while others were reused or incorporated into later construction. In this way, the excavation records not only loss, but also the process of recovery and reuse. Studying these layers literally allows archaeologists to read history in the soil. As for the 1897 deposits, they provide tangible evidence of colonial impact, complementing archival and oral records. They also serve as a reference point for interpreting older strata. Understanding the rupture clarifies the extent of prior occupation, the scale of craft production, and the organization of the palace precinct. In other words, recognizing destruction enhances understanding of creation. Through these physical traces, the excavation demonstrates that the story of Benin City is not only one of artistry and urban sophistication, but also of interruption and even adaptation. The material record preserves a history that written accounts alone cannot fully capture, grounding narratives of colonial violence in the very ground where it occurred. What do you know about the old Benin City? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.